you. Thanks very much. Thank you. All right, well, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me. And I think I would agree there must be a bunch of super agers in this room, so that's great. So what are we talking about? Well, we're going to talk about extending our health span, which I think, is anybody not interested in that here? Okay, just some. And the way we're going to do that is to prevent the major age-related diseases. I'm talking about cancers, cardiovascular disease, and neurodegenerative diseases. So I want to start with a patient of mine who's from here in La Jolla named Lee Rishall. And she is how I open up this book because she is a classic super ager. She's 98. She still is an oil painter, has a gallery. She is plugged in with all her friends and social network, and she's never been sick of any significant disease throughout her life. Now, why is this important? Because she's very representative of super agers. People think that this is a genetic story. Well, here's her family history as far as her mother, father, brothers, when they died. Mother 59, father 64, brother 43, and her other brother 75. This is not unusual. We studied 1,400 people, average age of 89, who'd never been sick, on no medications, and we did whole genome sequences. We found very little from their DNA to explain their phenomenal health span, okay? So there's a myth that it's genetics, but actually that's a small contribution, much less than has been expected. And that compares, by the way, Welderly is what we call that study. I wanted that to be the title of the book, but the publisher said nobody knew what that means. So yeah. Then there's the elderly, which are the counterparts who had very similar genomic profiles. And they are the typical people age 65 and older in this country who have at least one, if not more, of these chronic diseases. So we need to flip this elderly to the welderly, and how are we going to do that? Well, just recently in this journal, on the cover is Maria Morera, who was, up until last summer, the oldest human alive. She died in Spain a year ago, August, and before she died, she begged her physicians to study her. Please study me. And she thought that the reason she made it to 117 as a super centenarian was because she had 3 yogurts a day. Okay. Well, she's had the deepest profiling of her biology, her immune system, her gut microbiome, her DNA, as any person over the age of 100 or even 95 in history. And what did they find? Well, her immune system was remarkably youthful, as was her gut microbiome profile. And we're going to get to the immune system being a very essential part of this healthy aging story. Yes, she did have a healthy lifestyle. She didn't smoke. She drank a very minimal amount of alcohol. She even survived COVID when she was 114. So she was a very healthy lady. Now, the problem we have today is we have a lot of hucksters for longevity. We have longevity companies. We have these magazines saying it's the end of aging. No, aging is not going to end. I think everybody here would agree with that. Maybe we can modulate aging. And it's really pitiful that magazines like the Consumer Reports would have anti-aging supplements. There are no anti-aging supplements. There are no data to support that. Okay, and we have, this just keeps going. We're living to 120, old age is over, the pills to end aging. No, none of that is true. None of it. But we do have, on the other hand, a remarkable increase in the science of aging. We've had tremendous investment in biotech, such as, for example, Altos Labs here in San Diego. And they are making big strides to potentially someday reverse aging. But that's based on mice and rats, not humans. And someday we may get there. I wouldn't be surprised given the momentum that we're seeing, but we're not anywhere close. Now, there's another side to this, which is what I'm trying to get you to buy into, that we can prevent the age-related major diseases in the future. Not only that we can, but we will. And the reason we can do that is because we have, this is an arbitrary circus plot, but we not only have a knowledge about lifestyle plus, not just diet, sleep, exercise, but also many other factors we can get into. The omics, not just DNA, but especially I'll point out the era of the proteomics of proteins, no less the other layers. Already mentioned the gut microbiome and the epigenome. We have drugs and vaccines, and we even have cells to work with to modulate our age-related propensity to diseases. And we have multimodal AI to bring billions of data points on any given individual to integrate that, to predict and prevent. So, to me, the biggest advance in aging science is not that we have all these different shots on goal, like partial epigenetic reprogramming, senolytics to eradicate the senescent cells from our blood, all sorts of ideas out there, rejuvenating our thymus or the ovaries, but rather that we have new metrics of aging. We didn't have a way to have a biologic aging way to quantify that. We do now. We have these molecular clocks. Body-wide aging. The classic one was from Steve Horvath more than a decade ago. Now there's many others. These are mainly focused on the methylation pattern, the side chains of the genome. And they can be done inexpensively, widely, particularly in academic labs. And we also have other ways to get to body-wide aging. But that's not enough, because if you have someone whose actual age is many years younger than their body-wide age, that's not a good sign, but you can't really localize what the problem is. So now we have the big advance of organ aging, and particularly the proteins, the proteome. This was ushered in by Tony Wiscore at Stanford and his colleagues, and now been validated, replicated by many other groups. And the whole point here, this is late 2023, is that we can track the aging of each of our organs. And the immune system, which is of course not an organ, but a very important system. And all of these studies converge on this point, that if you look at the survival and the health span of people who have marked advantage in those lifespan and health span, there's two clocks that are very important, the brain and the immune system, and they dominate this. And of course, the other organs of the body are important, but it appears that this brain-immune system combo is remarkably powerful. We need to focus on that if we're going to make big headway in age-related diseases. And especially the immune system is important because we have no way in the clinic. There is no test in the clinic today for patients to say, what is the status of your immune system? It's actually remarkable that here we are in 2026 and we don't even have a way to assess that. But we will shortly, because there will be immune system clocks as the first step to determine the pace of aging our immune system. When your immune system is down, when it's gotten senescent, that's when you become vulnerable to these diseases, especially cancer. So these two terms, immunosenescence and inflammaging, a dysregulated immune system is going to promote inflammation throughout the body and in all these organs. And that is what is the basis for these age-related diseases and accelerated aging. And so knowing that, what's really important is that we know that risk factors suppress inflammaging and immunosenescence. just the things that we have known for years, but even now the data are so compelling that you can get 5 to 7 years of healthy aging starting at age 50, no less, even more, starting at a younger age. So we know lifestyle factors are very important, and we've learned a lot more about each of them. But we also need something beyond lifestyle factors because we can't count on people to adopt all these, and even when you do, you could be subject to these age-related diseases. And so, for example, we have to deal with the environmental toxins. We don't take care of our land, our air, our water, etc., full of microplastics, nanoplastics, the air pollution, forever chemicals. That's just one part that is going to make this whole progress stalled or even reverse it. Also, we have this issue of the GLP-1 drugs, which I think many of you who've been following this space may realize we've never seen a drug class like this. And these have potent anti-inflammatory. The benefit for the heart, for example, is only 1/3 explained by weight loss. And this transcends the other organs as well, kidney and liver. And so there's excitement about the GLP-1 drugs. In fact, today, in the journal Nature Biotechnology, it was proposed that is this the first drug for longevity? We'll see. That remains to be proven. But Alzheimer's disease is first up for us. We're starting a trial in January, thanks to a philanthropic supporter, to go after prevention of Alzheimer's. Now, pictured here are the amyloid tau proteins, which have been known for a long time as being critically important to progression or development of Alzheimer's. And what we also know, of course, that people think that this is the worst, most dreaded disease. In fact, worse than cancer, stroke, and heart disease combined. And it's on a steep rise. Now, what's interesting is 1 in 4 of us have the ApoE4 allele. How many of you have had an ApoE4 test? Okay, about 4 people. All right, interesting. Well, a lot of reason why people didn't get this is because there's nothing you could do about it. And we didn't understand why it was a significant risk factor for 1 copy, no less 2 copies. Well, now we know, of course, that not only is it prevalent, but guess what? The basis of this, which was described at Duke University in 1993, now we have 100,000 or 10,000 plasma samples and 1,300 cerebrospinal samples. The immune system is dysregulated with the ApoE4 allele, even more so with 2 copies than 1. But moreover, that we understand the immune system and this brain-immune system interaction is the time lag it takes to develop Alzheimer's, which is the same for cardiovascular disease and most cancers. 20 years. It takes 20 years. Don't you think we could get ahead of this with that much of a runway? So here is a plot of the progression of Alzheimer's disease, preclinical, before there's any cognitive impairment, so-called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. That time is interestingly now tracked by a blood plasma protein called p-tau217. How many of you have heard of p-tau217? 4 or 5 people, the same people that the ApoE4 allele. Interesting. Okay, this is one of the biggest breakthroughs in neuroscience in decades, because this tau protein at its 217 site tracks with Alzheimer's over the course of the 20 years. So if you have a 0 p-tau217, or if you lower it through exercise and diet and lifestyle improvements, you are delaying, at the very least, the onset of Alzheimer's. This is an extraordinary advance in this field. You wouldn't get this test unless you have a high risk. I'm not suggesting people go and get this, only if they have a polygenic risk score, ApoE4 allele, a family history that's of certain Alzheimer's, then you might want to check this. And if it's high, you might want to work on getting it low. This test supersedes all the other tests that have been nominated to track brain inflammation and progression to Alzheimer's. There are many others. In fact, when we get p-tau217, you can get other things like p-tau181 and neurofilament and other neuromarkers of Alzheimer's risk, that is, neuroinflammation markers. Now, why is this important? Well, this is like LDL cholesterol for heart disease because it's modulatable, right? So here in San Diego, back last April, the American Academy of Neurology had their presentation of this particular study. It's a small study, but randomized. And this is just one of the participants. She lowered her p-tau217 40%, her p-tau181 75% just by lifestyle. And she's representative of all the people in the intervention group. And so we're going to do a much bigger trial to take this to finality of that lifestyle alone makes a difference, and then we'll build on that various candidate drugs. Now, how many of you have had your shingles vaccine? Oh, that's impressive. Okay. Did you know that getting your shingles vaccine lowers your risk of Alzheimer's by 20 to 25%? Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah. These are 3 huge natural experiments in Wales, in Australia, and the US, and there's 2 more that are soon to be published. Every single one of them is concordant that shingles vaccines, these are natural experiments, better than randomized trials in large populations, just by happenstance of a birthday where that country was giving out the shingles vaccine. And so if this was a drug, this would be considered a blockbuster, that you could reduce Alzheimer's or dementia 25%. And I think you know of dementia, 75% is Alzheimer's. Now, what's interesting is this has nothing to do with the herpes zoster virus. It has to do with raising your immune system's capability, okay? And we can do that even without a herpes zoster vaccine, most likely in the future. So how we're proceeding with Alzheimer's, trying to eradicate this disease once and for all, is to take all these layers of data for each person and using multimodal AI, find the high-risk people, and then come up with ways to, using, for example, brain clock, p-tau217. These are great surrogates for one's risk over time to try to prevent this from ever happening. Now, it's the same template for cancer. For cancer, there was economists winning the war on cancer. That sounded really good, but at the same time, the New York Magazine said the war on cancer was canceled by the United States government administration. Yes. Well, much of the funding for cancer has, I think you know, been gutted in this country at levels of NIH and other public health agencies. But nonetheless, the progress is unmistakable. So for example, if you have a mammogram, did you know there are 2 companies that are FDA approved that with a normal mammogram will tell you that you still have a high risk in the next 5 years? Most women have no idea that this exists. And this is extraordinary because this is using AI interpreting the mammogram and making a diagnosis of high risk. This is just one way of picking up risks, and there are many others like the immune system. And so that data is really quite impressive. And for example, we've debated for years, should we use low-dose aspirin to reduce the risk of colon cancer? And the data are mixed because of the bleeding risk. But now we know the people who have a high risk of cancer, they have this condition called clonal hematopoiesis of indeterminate potential. The indeterminate is the worst term because it's clearly increased risk for cancer and cardiovascular disease, and we don't even measure it. And Sloan Kettering, one of our top cancer centers, has shown us that when you have all these layers of data, you can predict cancer many years before a scan detects cancer, which is already too late. That means there's already billions of cells if you can see it on a scan. So we can do this, eventually prevent cancer. And then the last of the 3 big age-related diseases is, of course, cardiovascular. Our group recently published that we can pick up the risk much better than ever before. And we studied in hundreds of thousands of people how we can do that. And now, just this week, in fact, 2 days ago, Medicare announced that they're paying for these scans that pick up risk, not detecting atherosclerosis, but inflammation in the artery, using AI that analyzes the fat around the vessel, which is picking up inflammation. There's 4 companies that have this capability, and what you see pictured here is the fat around the coronary artery that tells the story about how the T cells are activated and the risk for a heart attack or progression of heart disease is there. So we'll get to that too. And not only that, but the retina picture. Someday we'll be taking selfies of our retina through our smartphone and getting AI analysis. We're not there yet, but that's coming. And the reason for that is because it's rich. It's the richest medical image we know. It can tell whether a person is going to have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease 5 to 7 years before they have it. No less diseases of the kidney, the liver, the gallbladder, and this just goes on and on. Of course, establishing risk of heart disease and control of blood pressure, no less blood sugar. Now, a new study just came out last month from Germany, a really impressive study to add to all this. You've heard a lot about large language models. This is the first large health model. And basically, it's predicting diseases in each person 20 years before they occur, okay? And so, again, this is a health model, so it's a disease that's replacing word, all right? And instead of the next word should be, it's what's going to happen in the next 20 years, like pancreatic cancer or a heart attack. It's not just telling us what condition or event, it's telling us when, plus or minus months. This is extraordinary, and this is from GPT-2, which is a very primitive, low parameter model. Just think what it will be with much more refined models. We're also going to have people that are using sensors, whether it's a smartwatch or a ring or any others, ways to integrate all that data with the rest of your health data. We've already seen great examples of that. And in addition to that, instead of just continuous glucose monitoring, we'll be seeing next year from Northwestern, Shana Kelly and her group, continuous protein monitoring, like inflammation proteins, any protein in the body that can be continuously monitored through a smartphone with a sensor. So this is a lot of advances that are coming. So I just want to leave you with that today, when you get a primary prevention, I put quotes in prevention, checkup, if you get that by a state-of-the-art physician or clinic, you will get your vaccinations. That's good. You'll get a lipid panel and some chemistries, and maybe the doctor will even talk about lifestyle with you, maybe, if they have time. The future is we'll be getting polygenic risk score, genome sequence that can be done for less than $200. It tells us a lot about the risk of these diseases in each person. This model I just talked about, organ clocks, the immune system, not just through an organ clock, epigenetic clocks for the body-wide information, specific biomarkers, the lab, the AI of the labs, the retina and images, and all these other things. So that's why we're going to be able to someday, in the future, prevent these major age-related diseases. I'm excited about that. Hopefully I've at least piqued your interest in this possibility. It's far-reaching, but it's a lot more attainable than reversing aging. And so someday we'll see that we are going to use AI in a good way, not with the backlashes that we're seeing today. So thanks very much for your attention. Got it.
Thanks so much.
Oh, is it working? Yeah, great.
Thanks so much, Eric. Questions? Please tell us your name and where you're from.
It's Alan Spradling again. Still from Baltimore at the Carnegie. I'm all for gathering all the kinds of data you're saying and see what we can learn from it, including predictions. But I think there's a limit, because from what we know about many diseases, there are truly like stochastic events that are involved, such as, does the 5th gene in a colon cancer sequence to become, truly out of control happen, or doesn't it happen? But it could be due to radiation. And there's also just truly random events from, are you exposed to a certain virus that you didn't know you were going to be? So how do you think, even in principle, could you predict something 20 years in advance which cannot possibly assess these random aspects of disease?
Well, I spoke to Moritz Gerstung, who did that study of that the first large health model, and they were shocked at how accurate it could predict, and that's without other layers of data, like you said. All the viruses, we can get all the viruses you've been exposed to. I had that done and presented those data in the Super Agers book, and that will be something that will be available soon for everyone. But the environmental exposures, we can capture that. It wasn't in that model even that I mentioned. But your point about stochastic, yes, part of this health span that's extreme has got to be from good luck, right? Random. But that's not dominant. That's a small part. It may be just similar to the genetic component. So the point being is deep phenotyping, being able to get all this data, including environmental exposures, including viral exposures and other pathogens. These are really critical. That's the only way we're going to be able to get there. And yes, will we ever cover all of it? No. I'll admit that some of this is stochastic, some of it's random, some of luck, but we should be able to make a big difference from where we are today.
Question over here.
Alejandro de Ávila from Oaxaca, Mexico. I'm wondering whether you have looked at comparison with data from other countries, because surely the environmental factors are going to be different at different latitudes, but also other epigenetic components. And I think there is much to be learned from there. Of course, the quality of the data is questionable, but in some cases, there might be good reasons to compare.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to compare from countries. The large health model I mentioned was taking 400,000 people from the UK and 1.9 billion people from Denmark, very different populations. But for example, this week, there was a publication of 86,000 people from 27 countries throughout Europe to establish multilingualism as a very tight, robust link with health span. We didn't know that before. So yes, what you're saying is very important. We're on to something that's, you got to look at multi-ancestry, multinational, absolutely. This isn't, just, one ice pick view. Yeah.
Rowena Matthews, Tucson, Arizona. You've convinced me that you're really much better able to predict who will be a super ager with all this information, but you haven't convinced me that you can do anything about it once you do, short of taking a shingles shot.
I'm with you. That's why you have to do studies. That's why we're starting the prevention of Alzheimer's trial. There's never been a prevention of Alzheimer's trial. In December 1st, there's going to be 2 trials with Ozempic in people with mild Alzheimer's reported, large trials, placebo-controlled. If they show that you can change the progression of Alzheimer's, wouldn't it be something that we could actually prevent it? But we do know from all the data that lifestyle makes a big factor for all 3 of these age-related diseases. But we have to prove this idea that having these layers of data, which are not expensive, we're not talking about everybody going out and getting a total body MRI or all sorts of expensive things. We're talking about inexpensive things, integrating the data with the AI tools that we have, but we have to prove it. And that's why we're doing a trial. And once we finish Alzheimer's and layer on other interventions, we'll also be approaching, and others will as well, prevention of cardiovascular disease and of cancer. So this is a work in progress. I'm giving you a preview today of an exciting area. What I'm trying to submit to you is, of all the things that AI can do in medicine, to me, this is the most exciting opportunity. And only years ahead will we know if we actualize it.
Thank you,
Thank
Eric.
you.